God doesn't make mistakes when he makes any human person, but in particular, women. Our fertility, our childbearing, our breastfeeding abilities, these are not mistakes. These are not liabilities. These are critical for the continuation and the success of this human species and the race. I mean, like, we as humans need women to embrace and understand and love their bodies in order for us to have families and to have new life. How can we get the next generation of young women? How can we get every woman to not fear or be ashamed of the abilities of her body?
Leah Jacobson. She's a wife, a mother of 8, a women's health advocate, and a pioneer changing the way our culture views the female body. Over a decade ago, Leah Jacobson started something small. A single idea rooted in faith and conviction that women's natural bodies aren't broken, that the way we were created is not a flaw to be fixed, but a gift to be understood. That idea became the Guiding Star Project, a growing network of centers across the country offering holistic, life-affirming care for women, from fertility and pregnancy to birth and beyond. Today, Leah is leading a movement that reclaims the dignity of womanhood through an authentic, compassionate healthcare network. And as she'll tell you, her journey started not with a business plan, but with a calling. One she never could have imagined would spread this far. I'm Brian Westbrook, and this is Living Pro-Life. Well, welcome, Leah. We're very excited that you are on the broadcast today. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Brian. I'm happy to be here.
Well, Leah, you're doing some fantastic things there at Guiding Star Project, but it didn't always, you weren't at 7 locations all around the country and saving the world. You came from someplace. So tell us kind of the start of the Guiding Star Project.
Yeah, gosh. I often kind of joke about that. If I knew what God was like inviting me into or asking me to do, I probably would have said no, because I don't think I understood at the time, like, what the scope of what this work was. I'm a Midwest farmer's daughter. I grew up on a dairy farm. I went off to college at the big secular university in Minnesota, Duluth. And it was when I was a student at UMD that I began to realize a real disconnect between my peers and myself on my pro-life convictions, on my pro-natural health convictions, my pro-woman convictions. And so I think an activist sort of to rise as a college student, really. And then it was when we took over the Newman Center. I met and married my husband pretty young, and we took over the University of Minnesota Duluth Newman Center as young newlyweds. We moved into the Newman house, and it was working with college students, Catholic college students in particular, that I became astutely aware of a deep shame, an internalized fear, and a disconnect between even pro-life faithful people and the body and our fertility and giving birth. And so that's really where the heart, I think, of Guiding Star came from. I thought I was being called to kind of do something in Duluth, Minnesota. And so I, kind of set out like, we're going to start a birthing center in Duluth. And that was about 20 years ago. There currently is no birthing center in Duluth, but like you said, there's 7 locations in other states and, looking at expanding and growing. And God's kind of funny like that. I think he sometimes kind of tricks us into our ministries, like just by making us aware of a problem.
Right. So what is, just for the listeners, what is Guiding Star Project? What is important about it and what makes it unique?
Yeah, Guiding Star Project really it's kind of a women's health movement in a sense. And it comes from this position of natural law, this understanding of we're created beautifully. God doesn't make mistakes when he makes any human person, but in particular, women. Our fertility, our childbearing, our breastfeeding abilities, these are not mistakes. These are not liabilities. These are critical for the continuation and the success of this human species and the race. I mean, like, we as humans need women to embrace and understand and love their bodies in order for us to have families and to have new life. And so Guiding Star really comes from that place of how can we get the next generation of young women? How can we get every woman to not fear or be ashamed of the abilities of her body? This is beautiful. It crystallized as I started to do my master's work in women's health and wellness. It really began to crystallize as a vision for Guiding Star when I had the realization that sort of the opposition, the secular women's health movement, used the vehicle of women's healthcare. And when I began to really understand and see how they were able to change best practice, how they were able to embed things like abortion and contraception into the mainstream healthcare field and really change the entire definition of what reproductive health means, that's when the strategy and kind of the vision of Guiding Star crystallized into these brick and mortar centers and our education programs and our education curriculum. And we began to realize we need the authority of healthcare professionals and healthcare, allied people all across the field to come together and say, this is actually what's good and healthy for women. This is what the standard of care should be. So that's where Guiding Star kind of really began to catch steam, as when we recognized it's not just like an ideology. It's not just like, oh, women's bodies are great, but there's a vehicle for delivery that is incredibly important that we as pro-lifers, that we engage with and that we embed ourselves and become experts in.
Well, so just for the listeners, this is Leah Jacobson of the Guiding Star Project. Welcome again to the program. So tell me about a lot of these places around the country, these brick and mortar hospitals or some of these clinics, even in rural areas. Many of them are closing down or merging with the big, huge, giant hospital systems around the country. They just can't survive. So how is Guiding Star, filling that gap at the 7 locations you have and potentially at other places around the country?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really interesting point that you just made there. We're actually seeing a shrinking, in a sense, right now of maternal health care services to women all across the country. And this has nothing to do necessarily with, the pro-life laws or the abortion industry. It's not that. It's the regular labor and delivery, women's health, OBGYN practices that we're starting to see shrink and go away. And for many reasons, and that's a whole other podcast we could do, Brian, just about third-party insurance reimbursements and Medicaid reimbursements and all of those different business aspects of women's healthcare. But to your point, we are seeing kind of the rise of these sort of maternal health deserts, birth deserts. I was looking at the March of Dimes the other day, and it said I think it's 2.3 million women in our country right now live in a maternal health desert, meaning that there's no place in their county or like around them to deliver a baby. So if we as pro-lifers really care about these women choosing life, we have to help them choose birth. We have to help them give birth. So our centers are actually opening birthing centers. We're actually doing labor delivery services as well as well woman care, OBGYN care, fertility care, all the education stuff, all the worldview stuff. But we've actually moved into catching babies and delivering them because we need to.
Catching babies. It sounds so simple to catch a baby, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, we don't do much. Mom doesn't work. We're just there to help catch the baby.
That's true. That's true. So tell us, you had recently opened a Tampa location as well. So tell me what it takes, tell the listeners what it takes to get a birthing center open or a Guiding Star Project location open, what that takes and why that's important.
I mean, it takes medical professionals who are ethically aligned. It takes very brave individuals who are willing to go out on their own and have private practices, to be very innovative. It takes stepping outside of sort of the conventional system. It takes a creativity and a boldness. Our 3 midwives at our center in Tampa, the only reason that center works is because we have 3 medical professional midwives who are willing, to go without some of the luxuries of being in a larger practice at a larger hospital. Our call pool is only 3 people. That takes a little bit more of a sacrificial mindset, of a ministry mindset, to recognize that if we're going to do it right, we're not going to have the huge support of these big systems. To do it ethically and to do it correctly, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. And that means, things like foregoing even some of the third-party private insurance payments. Lots of different elements go into this, but it takes a creativity. I mean, our providers are all trained in doing hormone pellet therapies. That's a little outside the scope of a normal midwife. It's definitely within her licensure. She can do that. But most midwives don't take the time to learn that. Our midwives have to learn to take the time to do that because of our patient population and because of just honestly our financial model and our needs to keep these centers open. So communities that are a good fit for us as a Guiding Star Center are places that really truly believe that women have autonomy over their healthcare decision-making, that women are smart and that they can understand things. Our patient population, we need to make sure that we have enough women that believe in themselves, that they are going to choose our care because they believe they're smart and capable. And they believe that they can partner with us as their medical professionals to achieve good health.
Well, you said a little bit earlier that being pro-life is also being pro-birth. I'm not quite sure exactly how you put it, but tell us a little bit more about that. Go a little deeper.
Well, I think in this, post-Dobbs kind of moment that we're all pausing and looking around and realizing when we enact laws, that maybe rightfully restrict abortion access, we have to replace and step up our services. We are asking women to give birth. When we say that abortion is bad for you, that abortion is not what is best for our country, it's not what's best for you, implicitly we're saying giving birth is what's best for you. Giving birth is good for you. But then we're not necessarily following through and making sure that birth practices are, healthy, that they're good, that they're not traumatizing. And so when we look at some of our birth statistics in our country, we're not doing well. As pro-lifers, we have to pay attention to that and recognize that our outcomes are far below other developed nations in the world. We have the rise of something called birth trauma and women talking about how they never want to do this again. I mean, I knew this firsthand. I had experienced this firsthand as a lactation consultant. As a board-certified lactation consultant, I work with women in that immediate postpartum period. And the number of times I've had women say to me, like, I'm never going to do this again. Like, I will get sterilized. I will never give birth again because they had such a horrible pregnancy, delivery, breastfeeding, whatever experience. We have to care about that. We're asking her to give birth. We have to walk alongside her.
Tell us some of those stories. So what exactly is going through many of these cases of these women who have had a traumatic both pregnancy and then also birth and maybe even a breastfeeding experience?
The number of times that I've heard, women, just the doubt, the fear, the sense of I'm a bad mom. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I can't do this. Like, we all have had women in our life. Like, just pause for a moment and think about the women around you who have shared something about their birth story, but then have very quickly kind of moved on and said, oh, well, I have a healthy baby, so that's all that matters. And what she's really not saying is, I am suppressing tremendous shame, embarrassment, trauma, fear, anxiety, depression, all these things about that birth experience. And I'm just going to focus on the fact that I have a healthy baby because that's all too much for me to think about. I don't even have words for it. I don't even know how to process it. I feel so much, but there's really no space for it. I don't even know what just happened to me. I feel like maybe I was just victimized. Well, the solution that I'm going to do to take control of that is I'm never going to get pregnant again. And if I do, I'm going to take care of it so that I never have to be that vulnerable, that scared, that ashamed again. We've had these women in our centers.
Yeah, go a little deeper here. So give me a few of those examples. Of course, this is what they're feeling, but what kind of the practical things happen that what might make them feel this way?
Well, and it's so subjective. And some people may be like, well, I had a C-section and it wasn't a big deal for me. And so there is a level of subjectivity and resiliency. But for that first-time mom who comes in there is really not prepared for her birth experience in the way that it's going to happen at this facility, it could be as simple as not being asked or being given permission to do an exam, a vaginal exam. There's just a lot of expectations that if you're not prepared and you're vulnerable, that can be very traumatizing. We're going to check and see if you're dilated. Let's just check. And then all of a sudden you're like, what's happening? Oh, there's pressure. What's going on? I mean, I had a mom very, very recently just telling me, and she actually, she's a very close a friend of someone that I know. And she hadn't shared this with me until recently when I was asking her about where she's going to deliver her next baby. And we're both expecting, and we were talking about the hospital versus a birth center versus, a home birth experience. And she was sharing with me her last birth experience. She said, I felt sexually assaulted by this provider because they had, after the delivery of the baby had been delivered, safe delivery. She said, let me just check and see, if you need any stitches. And she's doing an exam. And so she knew there was an exam happening. And then all of a sudden she said, I felt just a tremendous amount of pressure. And this medical professional was pulling my placenta out. She hadn't delivered her placenta yet, but she was pulling on the umbilical cord. She said the pain was tremendous. She was scared. She didn't know what was happening. She thought all of a sudden that she was having a massive hemorrhage. It did lead to a hemorrhage. It did lead to a blood transfusion. She said she didn't ask me. She said she never told me that she was going to pull my placenta out, which is just bad practice in the first place. But it's simple things like that she's processing this now over a year later. She's expecting her next baby. This other baby's almost 2. And she's still feeling very upset and anxious about that experience. These are the things that drive women with poor resources, poor resiliency to say, no, I'm just not going to get in that situation again. I am going to take the abortion pill. I'm going to go have an abortion. I'm not going to do this again. Because I don't want to have to stand up for myself when I'm vulnerable. I don't want to have to tell people, don't pull my placenta out of me. They shouldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I, we just had our 8th baby. I know that you're expecting number 8 here as well. So congratulations.
It's a good number.
It's a great number. It's a great number. But like some of the conversations we had prior to this birth, but also other births as well, is Brian, I need you to stand up for me. Right. We're going to go in and I need you to stand with me. And here's a list of all the things that I want to be done in these certain ways. And Brian, I want you to, be my advocate at that point. And she knows now, but early on, as she had her first several babies, first several babies, that is, 1, she didn't know what she wanted. And 2, she didn't know to ask well in advance to make sure that in the moment, these things are being taken care of.
It's just so vulnerable. You're so vulnerable. You're in more pain than you've ever experienced. You're probably not really well prepared for that. And in the back of your mind, there's this question of, am I dying? Am I dying? And when you don't have the professionals around you that are assuring you and saying, this is normal, you're not dying, this is what you're feeling and this is normal. Birth can be a really traumatic experience for women, unfortunately. And we just haven't done a great job as the pro-life movement to stop and ask women, how was your birth? Are you okay?
Yeah. I think it's one of those moments where it's just this intimate thing. We cover ourselves with clothing, right? And during birth, there's just you're on a show. There. Literally, a lot of these places, the bed goes super high, and there's literally spotlights to light up the entire area, right? And it's but of course, I'll never experience that. But for mom, I mean, to have a room full of people, depending on how risky they might find that to be, and then to be up on a huge bed with spotlights literally in your private areas, that seems like quite the experience that might be difficult or extremely difficult for some of these moms. How is it different?
That's why we feel so strongly just even about the midwifery model of care and birth centers and getting into birth, catching babies. You're right. That is such oh, that sounds so easy, catching babies. No, that's not what we're actually doing. We're just there to help mom, catch her own baby in a sense. That's usually how it actually happens. But we're there to protect that space and keep her in control in a sense, keep her in a position of authority and autonomy over her experience and herself, because those are the kind of women that walk out as strong advocates for their babies, for their children. They feel strongly connected to their children, much lower rates of depression. So we feel so strongly about this as a pro-life conviction that we really make birth as peaceful and as empowering as possible.
So I know that you're an author as well. So how can we read about a lot of these things? I know you go into massive detail in your book. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I wrote my book actually kind of in early COVID. So 2021, I wrote the book Holistic Feminism. And it kind of was trying to address a little bit how we got here to this shifting standard of care, how we have women's health, defined. We hear women's health and it's synonymous with contraception and abortion. Women's health and reproductive health are like the same kind of thing almost, and it means abortion and contraception. So it was a deep dive on my part at that point of just historically understanding how do we undo this? And that really is what we're doing with Guiding Star, is putting that into practice, the how do we undo where we are. And it's restoring a sense of autonomy and trust in our original bodies and our natural, unsuppressed, unaltered bodies. So you can go find Holistic Feminism if you want and read about it. So I find all the history fascinating when you actually do a deep dive into women's health. The standards have shifted tremendously over the last, 200 years. Even just like breastfeeding rates. Like I find all this really just fascinating. Like what makes breastfeeding popular in one generation and completely distasteful in another generation? Like why do we think what we think about women's bodies?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're talking with Leah Jacobson with the Guiding Star Project. What is your big advice for those who are listening, whether they want to get into the medical field, if they want to get into pro-life work generally, or if they want to become a patient of Guiding Star? What's your advice for some of those people listening to the program today?
I mean, if you're feeling called to like lead or do something, like for me, it was just sort of this, like I would try to not do something and then I would be like righteously upset and be like, somebody should do something. And if you keep finding yourself doing that, like chances are good the Lord is like, hey, like you see a problem, do something. So don't ignore that. Like that sort of righteous anger of somebody should do something, that somebody is probably you because you see the problem clearly. And then just work really hard to understand that problem comprehensively. I think that's something that I'm always trying to encourage young advocates, people kind of coming into a field. Really take the time to pause and look around and understand the work that's been done, the advocacy that's been done, because you can, build off of some incredible work. The pro-life movement has very old foundations. A lot of these other areas of the movement, there's been a lot of incredible work done. Like it does no good for me to come in and try to rewrite, Ina May Gaskin's midwifery model of care. I'm like, no, it's excellent. It's really good. I'm going to build off that and I'm going to find partners and allies who agree with me and understand the nuances. So just take the time to really understand and find the correct partnerships.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Leah. We appreciate the work you're doing with Guiding Star Project, and thank you for being on the program.
Thank you, Brian.